Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Jeremy Hafner, Chancellor here at the University of Denver, and I am delighted to welcome you to another fabulous conversation about the Middle East offered by our Center for Middle Eastern Studies. What is the purpose of a university? I often ask myself this question. I believe that the purpose of a university is centered around the pursuit of truth, which needs an environment that embraces open and free inquiry, that needs freedom of expression, civil dialogue, evidence-based reasoning, and great respect of really important thought leaders. Tonight, you'll experience exactly the manifestation of the purpose of a university. The Center for Middle Eastern Studies is one of the gems in the crown of Korbel, which is one of the gems in the University of Denver, because it embraces the purpose of a university, this notion of tackling complex issues in an open dialogue that helps us better understand. Our role tonight is to listen to understand. It's never to listen to win. It's to listen to appreciate and to get a better understanding of the very complex issue. I am so proud of the Center for Middle Eastern Studies and the Korbel School of International Studies, and I just welcome you here for that purpose. So I want to get out of the way and let the real experts come in here. So let me introduce the director of the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Korbel, and that's Micheline Ishay. She's internationally known for her work in human rights, political theory, the Middle East, of course, and international affairs. She is the author and editor of half a dozen of books and numerous articles, including Internationalism and Its Betrayal, Nationalism Reader. Her books include The History of Human Rights from Ancient Times to the Globalization Era, and The Human Rights Reader, major political essays, speeches, and documents from ancient times to the present. She is widely focused, of course, her interests on human rights, and these books have been translated into multiple languages and published in multiple editions. The third edition of the Human Rights Reader was released recently in 2022. And her book, The Levant Express, The Arab Uprisings, Human Rights, and the Future of the Middle East was published in 2019 by Yale University Press. She's currently working on a new book focusing on the future economic integration of the Middle East and North Africa, and she has lived and traveled extensively in the Middle East. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Micheline Ishay.
Thank you so much, Chancellor Hafner, for this very, very kind introduction. My mother would be proud of me. So welcome to the Center for Middle East. Just a brief recap about what the center is all about. We are an institution, a center dedicated to advancing knowledge and understanding of the Middle East. We offer interdisciplinary programs, research opportunity, and events that focus on the region's diverse cultures, history, contemporary issues. CMES, the Center for Middle East Studies, aim to foster dialogue. This is one of our primary goals, and provide insight into politics, economic, social dynamics, and international relations. The center also works closely with scholars, policymakers, community to promote informed discussion and solutions on key Middle Eastern topics. We, of course, reserve, as any other place in the university, the right not to always agree with our speaker. That's normal, right? And sometimes I don't even agree with myself. So welcome, everyone, really. We are here to tackle some serious topics, but let's keep our expectations in check, you know? No one is leaving here with the idea that we are solving the Middle East by the end of the session, although I heard that one of my colleagues thought he was doing that. No, sir, you're not leaving with the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize today. That's pretty much clear. But it's good to try. So let's try to keep calm, and it's going to be a lively debate, not as lively as you may wish, just lively. We'll keep it lively, but not too lively, not too heated. And remember, if you disagree with this or with that panelist, it's okay. That's part of what we do here. No need to interrupt. No need to be overly agitated. We're here for a robust and civil conversation. And if you disagree, remember that in the Middle East, you know what they do in the Middle East when they're in disagreement, Ahmed? What do they do? No, that's they do that too. But you know what else do? They always agree there is one thing that is a global unifier. And you know what that is? They go and eat hummus, which, by the way, is on the left side. You can get some of your hummus. It's debated who invented hummus, but aside from that, please remember, hummus is the one common denominator. So let me turn to my colleague, Dr. Ahmed Abdrabou. Abdrabou, doctor, is the Center for Middle East Associate Director of the Joseph Korbel School. His research focus on democratization in Egypt and the Arab world, civil-military relation and political Islam. His most recent book, and our good governance and civil security relations, a comparative study of Turkey and Egypt, that was published in 2021, but he's not really bored because he keeps working hard, this gentleman, because he's the Arabic translator of a very recent book. You might have heard Fareed Zakaria 2024 New York Times bestseller, Age of Revolution, Progress and Backlash to the Present. I have no idea when you have the time to just translate that, but you just did. So thank you, Ahmed, and welcome. Let me welcome my Associate Director.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to be the timekeeper today, so I'll just try to make my introductory remarks as brief as possible. First of all, thanks Chancellor Jeremy, Dean Fritz, Professor Schneider, and Professor Ishay. And I would love also to thank Mandy, our excellent program director, for her job. Actually, without her, many of what you see happening here would have never been possible. Also, thanks to our excellent students, Zaria, Reza, Micah, and Nancy. I hope I didn't forget anyone. They are actually always working behind the scenes. I hate to do this, but unfortunately, I have to. I was asked to, I have to read just one paragraph, one very brief paragraph from the university policy when it comes to disruptions. And again, I really apologize. I have to read it. I hate to do it, but I will have to. So the University of Denver is committed to a culture of robust debate, open dialogue, and facilitation of free expression on its campus. When speech or other forms of creative expressions are disrupted and an unacceptable denial of freedom may result. Acts of protest or disagreement with a speaker on the university campus may not unduly interfere with communication between the speaker and the audience. If such interference ensues, the parties responsible for it shall be notified that this is unacceptable. If the parties continue to violate the right of free expressions of the speaker, event organizers will take some measures to make sure that the event is not interrupted. That said, I trust all of you, and I'm sure we will have a very good discussions. And again, we will have, it's my job to ensure that we have time for the Q&A. I'll make sure we have enough time for the Q&A. So if you have any question, any comment, just I guess you have some notes and pens, just write it down and the time will come for it. So let me just, for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, an opening statement. It's really an honor, but also a big responsibility to moderate this event during such turbulence in the Middle East. The title of our discussion is Middle East at Crossroads, what's next? And to be honest, I usually ask myself, when was the Middle East not at crossroads? Always at crossroads. But definitely, I guess the magnitude, the scale that we are talking about right now is different. The choices made by regional actors and the international community over the last 16 months since horrific October 7 attacks, and in the coming few months will shape the immediate future and the long-term prospects for peace, stability, and justice in the region. Since the attacks, October 7, 2023 attacks, the Middle East has been plunged into one of the most volatile periods in its modern history. Nowhere in this more evident than in Gaza, where an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe is unfolding. The death toll, as you maybe know, already is over 45,000. Civilian population is facing starvation and displacement on an unimaginable scale. And the very infrastructure necessary for survival, you name it, schools, hospitals, refugee shelters, has been systematically destructed. And the urgent question now is how the world responds to such suffering and whether international mechanisms can play a meaningful role in addressing it. One such mechanism is the international justice system, specifically the International Criminal Court, the ICC, and the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. The ICC's recent move to seek arrest warrants for both Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Hamas leaders on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity signals a historic shift in accountability in the region. While some view this as a necessary in upholding international law, like myself, others argue it will deepen political divides and further entrench the conflict, which I agree with as well. Meanwhile, the ICJ's deliberations on the case brought by South Africa against Israel, accusing Israel of genocide, the Israeli government of genocide in Gaza, are being closely watched as a test of whether international law can be applied fairly and effectively to all parties in a conflict. These developments raised profound questions. Can international law serve a meaningful check on regional state actions? Will the ICC and the ICJ rulings translate into tangible measures or consequences, or will geopolitical interests override justice? Adding to these concerns is an alarming proposal made by President Trump to relocate the population of Gaza and create what he called the Middle East Riviera. Such plans, which mount to, in my point of view, ethnic cleansing, violate the core principles of international law, and set a dangerous precedent for global conflicts. The world must reject any attempt to normalize mass displacement under the guise of security or political expediency. Just for those who don't know, we have already 60% of Gaza people are already refugees. So they live in Gaza, but they already refugees. And we have 26% of those who live in the West Bank are also already refugees. With the recent information, I got it from the ILTV. It's a very famous Israeli platform in English, that President Trump may give the green light in the coming 2 weeks to the right-wing cabinet in Israel to annex the West Bank. Such a break from the US foreign policy towards the Middle East since the Second World War. And of course, in my point of view, if this happens, it will unfortunately lead to unexpected repercussions and maybe a resume of the war. Beyond Gaza, the region remains at a breaking point. Lebanon stands on the verge of deeper instability as tensions between Hezbollah and Israel may escalate at any moment. Even though we understand Hezbollah has been hit badly by Israel, as the top leader of Hezbollah, as the iconic figure of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, has been killed. However, we also understand that for the very specific dynamics we have in Lebanon, Hezbollah is supported at least by at least 1/3 of the population of Lebanon, not to mention Iran, as they use Hezbollah as a proxy. In Syria, such a long conflict continues to be a battleground for regional and international powers, which uncertainties about her new leader, Ahmed al-Shara, and his future plans. And of course, in Iran, through its alliances, proxies, and strategic calculations, is trying to shape both the immediate and long-term trajectory of Middle Eastern geopolitics. So today, we have so many questions we want to answer about the future of justice and peace and coexistence in the Middle East. Or, unfortunately, I'm always pessimistic that the entire region will catch on fire again, and we will just go to another episode of hell. So, in my point of view, the answer depends not only on regional actors, but also on the global communities' commitment to upholding human rights principles and international law. So, with that said, today we have a very strong panel. We have so many experts today. Let me introduce them, since Professor Ishay was already introduced. So let me introduce Larry Garber. He is an international independent consultant and adjunct faculty at George Washington University, William and Mary University, and University of Denver, where he teaches graduate level courses on international development and comparative election law. And he is, listen to that, he's a former senior official at USAID, including 2 missions as acting assistant administrator of the agency policy bureau, and 5 years as mission director for West Bank and Gaza, and that was between 1999 and 2004, almost the time of the Second Palestinian Intifada. From 2015 to 2017, he was detailed to the faculty of the National Defense University, where he taught senior military and civilian officials. Ambassador Gary Grappo, you know him. He's a former US ambassador to the Middle East and in a number of very strategic Arab capitals, Middle Eastern capitals, Riyadh, Oman, and Jerusalem. And since 2016, he is a distinguished fellow at the Center for Middle East Studies at Korbel School. He possesses over 50 years of diplomatic and public policy experience in a variety of public, private, and nonprofit endeavors. Last but not least, even though he's not with us on the stage, but I will invite him later, Professor Adam Ravner is Associate Professor of English and Jewish Literature. Professor Ravner, he is the director of the Center for Judaic Studies. And by the way, I forgot to mention that the center is sponsoring this event. Thanks, Adam. And he taught since 2008 at Korbel, and his acclaimed book, In the Shadow of Zion, Promised Lands Before Israel, was published by NYU Press in 2014. And his second book, The Jew Who Would Be King, is forthcoming from the University of California Press. Adam's academic articles and general interest journalism have appeared in numerous outlets in United States and United Kingdom, and later Professor Ravner will join me in moderating the Q&A. So with that said, and since we're already running behind time, so let me ask our panelists to kindly, in 4 to 5 minutes, just give us some opening remarks reflecting on, from your expertise, from your angle, the development since October 7 up until now.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, and thanks all of you for being here. It's a pleasure to join my colleagues up here. I'll just give a quick overview of how I see the region and where we, and the direction we may be seeing it going over the next few weeks. But I really hesitate to offer a prognosis. Where you ask me to do that, I think I'd rather walk a tightrope between two tall buildings or over a deep canyon. It's pretty difficult at this point. As Ahmed alluded to, the Middle East is really on tenterhooks right now, no question. Conversely, and ironically, the United States and Israel are probably in the best position they have been in a very long time. And that's a result of the events that occurred over the last 17 months, most especially with the war in Gaza, but also conflict with Hezbollah and Iran. The three areas that I just want to quickly touch upon, and we can get into details later, and I really would like to. And the first is Gaza. The current ceasefire, phase 1, is going to expire on Saturday. The various sides were supposed to have negotiated the conditions for a phase 2 by then, and they were going to move to a phase 2. Those talks have moved very little, have made very little progress. It's not even clear when they have met, although they have met. And so we're really uncertain of what's going to happen come Saturday. The hope and expectation, at the very minimum, and there's no provision for this, is that the two sides will agree to extend phase 1. And there's grounds for some hope there because neither side wants to resume the war. Neither Hamas nor Israel. As for the Trump plan, I won't spend a lot of time talking about it because it doesn't deserve it. One struggles for adjectives to describe that proposal. Unhinged, bonkers, loony, crackers, any. No student of the Middle East would even contemplate the proposal that he made. On the other hand, it has provoked a lot of thought among Arab governments. And there have been two meetings, or one meeting last week in Riyadh among the GCC plus two, the two being Egypt and Jordan. And there will be a meeting next week of the broader Arab League. And there are notions that they will try to table a proposal with all good intentions, but probably untethered to the reality of Gaza right now. I'd be happy to talk about the details of that. The next issue that I really think deserves attention, and that's Lebanon, because Israel truly has achieved victory in Lebanon, not only for itself, but for the people of Lebanon. And for the first time, Lebanon today has a responsible, competent government. In fact, a president for the first time in 2 years. But having said that, this new leadership faces deep, profound political tensions within Lebanon that have existed ever since the end of the Civil War back in 1990, an economy that's really in a depression right now, and a major challenge, and that is its responsibility to disarm Hezbollah. They can't do this by themselves, given the resources and the capabilities they currently have, and are going to need help from Western countries, most especially the United States, at a time when budgets are extremely tight and some countries are discontinuing their foreign assistance programs. And if Lebanon fails at this challenge that's before them right now, it spells further instability and misery for the people of Lebanon, instability and dire threats for the people of Israel with the rise of Hezbollah, and a challenge for the United States going forward in terms of the Middle East. The last point I'm going to touch on very briefly now, and that is Iran. I think it's fair to say the possibility of a war with Iran is possible. It's real. It can happen. It's being considered and probably has already been planned in Jerusalem, and I suspect very much so in Washington and in Tampa, Florida, the headquarters of Central Command. What determines Whether that goes forward, partly Iranian behavior, if they move toward weaponizing their nuclear efforts. They're very, very close, as they have been for actually years now. And also the perception of Israel of when is the most opportune moment to strike, because Iran is very vulnerable right now. They were humiliated by these two attacks by Israel. They're probably not able to protect themselves as well as they would like, and Israel does perceive a vulnerability which they may potentially exploit with an attack on the Islamic State.
Thank you, Larry. And by the way, Larry, I have so many questions for you. So.
You don't want me just to keep to my 6 minutes, or?
Yeah, please.
So, first of all, thanks for the introduction. Thanks for inviting me to participate. Coming from Washington, I have to say it's quite a pleasure to be sitting on a panel where I can look out at beautiful mountains in the distance through the windows here. So I want to offer two perspectives in this opening panel. From my involvement with Gaza over the last couple of years, and I'm going to go a little bit back before October 2023. I was in Gaza in March of 2022, as part of a delegation, a small delegation that was in the West Bank to observe the municipal elections that took place at that time. And I spent a day and a half in Gaza as part of that visit. It was the days before Ramadan. I don't want to say I did an in-depth exploration of what was happening in the markets, but they were open and active. I was surprised, even before Trump made his statement about a Gaza Riviera, there were several new hotels that had already opened. I'm not sure how much they were occupied, but they had certainly been built since the last time I had been there 15 years earlier. I spoke with a number of Palestinian NGO interlocutors who I knew from prior times, and they described the relationship with Hamas, which had then been in power for 15 years in Gaza, as a live and let live. Hamas did its thing, and they were able to do their thing. They were at that time pushing Hamas to hold municipal elections. As I said, I was there for the municipal elections that had just taken place in the West Bank for the first time in 20 years. Interesting, in late September 2023, about a week before the October 7th events, Hamas leadership in Gaza acquiesced and sent a letter to President Abbas asking that he instruct the Election Commission to prepare for municipal elections. Whether this was a ruse, to hide what was going to happen a week later, or whether this reflected a division within Hamas, I don't know. I think it'll take some time till historians sort that out. Like many others, since October 7th, I have been both obsessed with following the events from Israel-Palestine and traumatized by them. Given my previous work with USAID, I dedicated my attention to anticipating what might happen on the day after. I found the field crowded with as various government policymakers and think tank experts were preparing elaborate plans on the subject. Hence, I decided not to repeat those efforts, but took it upon myself to compare the various reports, and by the end of December, I had reviewed about 30 of them, to see common themes and to assess their likelihood of serving as a platform for policymakers. The day after plans in general, whether in Gaza or elsewhere, but particularly in Gaza, need to address 4 key issues. Who will govern Gaza? Who will provide security within Gaza? How will the catastrophic humanitarian conditions be addressed given Israeli security concerns? And what are the priorities for rebuilding Gaza in a manner that contributes to Palestinian political aspirations? I could describe the different approaches taken in the various plans, but the most important point, given limited time, is that there is still, 15 months later, no consensus among the major players on any of these issues. In this regard, it's important to note, as Gary mentioned, that the phase one of the negotiations are supposed to, the phase one is supposed to expire at the end of this week. Phase two and phase three, which are referenced in the agreements, call for phase two, an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, the return of the remaining hostages in exchange for further Palestinian prisoner releases, and agreement on a plan to rebuild Gaza. Needless to say, those deadlines will not be met, and we are now waiting, as Gary alluded to, the Arab summit in Egypt to present an Arab plan. While there's much speculation about what it will contain, there are also many moving parts even as we speak. And of course, Israel and the United States would still have to buy into whatever plan emerges from the Cairo summit. And there's considerable pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu about resuming the war from within his own cabinet. And again, President Trump basically has said, do what you need to do. So those who believe there is an opportunity to move forward with a revitalized peace process and a realistic plan to rebuild Gaza must continue to hold our breaths and hope for the best.
Thank you. Micheline.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to just gonna go along the frame of the panel title, which is the Middle East at a crossroad. And in a crossroad, there is always a very dark path and then another that is a more positive, a possible path that is more optimistic. So I'm gonna just try to take those two paths and see how they look like. So we know that the fall of the Assad regime was pivotal in the region, ushering a period of instability and a realignment of power dynamics across Syria, Lebanon, and Iran. Syria is a fractured state. Yes, you can see it behind me. Despite Assad's fall, we have currently an interim leader, some of you may know his name, Ahmed al-Shara from the HTS, who is still struggling to unify the country. Syria remains deeply divided among the different factions that are backed by different foreign powers. You can see that above me. For instance, Turkey supports the Syrian National Army, the SNA, which is in the northeast, and amalgamations really of former rebel groups opposed to Assad. That's not the correct slide. The US back the Syrian Democratic Force, the SDF, a pro-Kurdish force closely tied to the Kurdish separatists in Turkey. And then Israel has expanded its security borders in the southwest, establishing army posts on the Syrian side of the Mount Hermon. So that sort of gives you the picture that not only of the internal division, but how other external actors are actually in the picture as well. So one could imagine that with Damascus losing control over large swath of the country, Syria risks to become a weak state that could be dominated by non-state actors, that could invite Iran's renewed support for Alawite militia along Syria's Middle Eastern Mediterranean coast. That is an option that, that could happen. Now we have also Lebanon, as my colleague here, Gary, mentioned. Lebanon is truly, as Gary said, facing a real major challenges despite Hezbollah weakening, particularly after the Israel targeted strikes against key Hezbollah leaders. So not to say that Lebanon was not in a crisis prior to October 7, it was. It was at the brink on economic collapse, but compound to the war, it's still really struggling. A dire economic situations, the displacement of several thousands of people from the south of Lebanon, and then last a very weak government that is struggled to regain control over Hezbollah's influence. So this is not a very simple picture. So Mr. Ayoun, the new president of Lebanon, will have to try to figure out how to keep his own government in sync. And then we have Iran. This is a really wonderful neighborhood. Iran is also facing real difficulty. There was the swift collapse, you could say, of the Assad regime, really marked a devastating blow to Iran, disrupting its long-standing axis of resistance. After all, you know, they spent $30 billion to support the axis of resistance. So that was a major blow. But however, Tehran's autocratic leadership has proven resilient since 1979, often adapting itself and shifting geopolitical landscape. And so one could see, and that's sort of like the doomsday analysis of Gary here, that Iran could respond dangerously by accelerating its nuclear weapons program to regain deterrence. And that's not something that should be overlooked. Yemen continues to be in a constant chronic crisis for a very long time, regardless of the October 7. And it's very, very difficult, despite the fact that it's one of the countries which is experiencing one of the largest humanitarian crises, to just wonder how it can address its future moving forward. Did I say I'm going to go to the positive side? Yeah, I do.
You have 1 minute.
You know, it is, but I want to listen to that because it's, they're going to talk about dark things. I'm going to talk about, so no, you have to, you know, because this is the toughest work. The toughest work is to think about moving forward, not to describe how horrible things are. Most analysts argue that peace required first an end of violence. First comes the end, that's what most people would say. First you have to comes the end of war, then peace, then reconstruction, and finally new political arrangements, and sort of in that sequence. But others contend often that without tangible proposal for a better future, there is really little reason to hope for the end of fighting. Actually, peace is just a piece of paper that people can sign, but if there are no tangible position and things that can happen after that, they are just worth nothing. And we know that because Oslo just failed, or the Oslo Agreement failed. So there are certain economic initiatives out there. Just move my slide over there. An alternative to conflict, and here I'm just going to give you a couple of examples, lies in robust economic initiative. For instance, the India-Middle East European corridor, called IMEC, was designed to bolster regional trade and realign geopolitics. This was a very ambitious project. And you know, it was signed. Do you know when it was signed? In 2023 in New Delhi, in September, October, late September. It was aimed to reconnect India and Europe with the Gulf, reducing shipping costs and fostering economic growth. Okay, it was also originally conceived to outcompete with China, but nonetheless, it was a real effort to revitalize a region that was sinking in greater economic despair with the highest level of unemployment among the youth population. One could imagine if that was brought back onto the table, which was really Biden's aspiration in September of 2023, that this arterial effort could link to different initiatives, to different countries that are failing, such as Lebanon or Syria or the Palestinian territories. That's sort of one of the projects that are out there. There are many other projects out there, but I just want to make sure that I leave you with the last one. Well, maybe not. Maybe just to say the following thing. Economic integration, we all know, cannot guarantee long-term peace alone. We get that. And particularly, it's very difficult without democratic governance. We know that. However, a region of that sort that has the highest unemployment rate is a key driver of chronic conflict. And economic diversification, renewable energy initiatives, broad employment opportunity, and improved political representation are essential for lasting peace. So if we know that, even from FDR, who was a real realist during the time of the Dumbarton Oak, that when he was considered the end of World War II, he was also considered the regime that will come after World War II. So those are the type of initiatives that we have to keep in mind as we're thinking way to move forward. So there are two paths in the road. You choose which one to take.
Thank you.
I'll take the longer one.
Yeah, I'll stay with you, but you have to promise, like, your answer is going to be in only 2 minutes. Today I was watching the ILTV, and there was this very sad funeral of the Bipas family, the hostages who killed while in captivity. And of course, it's understandable that people were sad. That was a funeral for a mom and two young kids. But there was also some sort of a report from the streets of Tel Aviv, and people really, to me, sounded very agitated. And again, to me, they sounded like they are always blaming Prime Minister Netanyahu. If you can kindly, in 2 minutes, walk us through the political landscape in Israel right now.
In how many minutes?
2. 3.
2. So let's start with today. So today we have a ceasefire that is delayed, that is sort of, it's a long stage one, as we know. The coalitions of Benjamin Netanyahu is not one that would survive if there was an election tomorrow, or today, or yesterday. We know that about 65% are not supporting that specific government. Having said that, it's quite clear that there will be all effort possible to make sure that the government does not fail, because the ultra-right parties and the Likud parties have no interest to go back to an election in which they're going to come below, the seat numbers will go below the current one, and in which some of the party, the one of Smotrich, might not even pass the threshold, which is 3%. So just giving this landscape, it's not doing well if there is not election going on. There is a strong position in Israel to continue the second stages of the ceasefire. This is a great majority. Most people want that. Most people also want to have a committee that will investigate the war. They're very keen on making sure that that will happen, which is, by the way, for those of you who do not know that after each war, there is a committee that investigates the war. They're very thorough, they're very detailed, and the Israelis have attempted to push that, and always so far there's been a pushback by the Israeli government. But interestingly enough, and it's almost a contradiction with stage 2 of the ceasefire, a great majority of Israelis, including the government, do not wish to have Hamas stay in power. They want, in one way, to continue the stage 2, even at a high cost, but they do not wish to see the continuations of Hamas in Gaza. Is that 1 minute? 2 minutes? Do you want me to continue? 1 more? Or is just 1 more? What? Okay.
She's technically my boss.
No, you're the moderator, you're my boss. I'm just, and where should I go with that? Okay, there's been, just going back to Gary's positions about the ludicrous Trump proposal. It's very interesting because it's been out in Israel right now, and I was reading it. Mr. Lapid, just yesterday, or was it today, in Foreign Policy, suggested a very interesting peace proposal called the Egyptian peace proposal, in which Egypt will be taking over the Gaza Strip for a period of 8 years, maybe 15 years. You know, by the way, they were there in 1948 to 1967. I don't know if you knew that. That was where so they will take over, they will be the guardians, they will just manage, they will economically, the humanitarian assistance, and will help foster the development of a Palestinian governance. That's in combinations with the Gulf countries and other partners. So that's sort of like a more detailed peace proposal, but I found it quite interesting. And you don't think it's interesting?
No.
You know,
as a moderator, hopefully I will have 1 minute. Not that I represent Egypt, but because I know that.
I thought it would go my way because I was talking about the Egypt. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
So I thought it was an interesting one, and I'm happy to discuss why.
Sure, we will.
I don't think it's interesting because maybe you think that the Gaza Lago is more interesting. But anyway,
okay,
we'll get to
yeah. Thank you. Larry, as I said, I have so many questions, but let me just ask two at one time. You still have 3 minutes only. The first one is, as Gary said, and as I said, it doesn't seem that the proposal made by Trump is practical. In my point of view, and I guess maybe some agree with me, it's some sort of technical ethnic cleansing. However, there is also a real fact that Gaza is destructed. And if you ask the people if they want to stay or leave, just if I put myself in their position, I would say, of course, I want to leave. I want to have, you know, a home. What's your take on this point of like relocation of Gaza versus the humanitarian approach, which is they deserve to have a safe home? And my second question is it from a technical point of view, is it possible to reconstruct Gaza while Gazans are there?
So, good questions. Just a quick comment on Lapid's proposal. I mean, it's the first, you know, serious proposal coming out of anyone in the Knesset other than the ethnic cleansing proposals from the far right. But it's not the government of Israel's proposal, and it's not the government of Egypt's proposal. So we're a long way from that being even taken seriously, although I'll give it credit, it does deserve a little bit more consideration than Trump's proposal. So, you know, that's where we are in terms of that. In terms of, I mean, I do think President Trump did raise in a question that many of those who've been contemplating and preparing these various day after plans have not totally addressed in their plans, which is the destruction is catastrophic. The UN just released, UN, World Bank, European Union released about 10 days ago their latest needs assessment, which describes in detail the costs of, or the amounts of infrastructure that was destroyed and what it would take to rebuild it. In January 2024, when they did their first one, the number was 18 billion. It's now up to 53 billion. You know, large numbers. But you have, first of all, in terms of rebuilding, you're going to have to deal with the rubble that's there, huge amounts of rubble. You're going to have to deal with the unexploded ordnance that's there. Again, we don't know how much that'll be an issue, but certainly in other conflicts, that has been a major first step that is required. So that has to be taken care of, and the immediate needs of the population have to be taken care of. Food, water, electricity, you know, and then you get to the next stage, schools, hospitals, all of which have been destroyed. And again, whether you've rebuilt Gaza or not, those issues are going to need to be addressed during the next year. So I agree with one part of the premise, which is many Gazans, if given a choice, might decide to leave. But no one's offering them that choice right now because no one wants to have, you know, whether in Egypt or Jordan or whether in the United States, no one's looking to have 1 million, 2 million Palestinian refugees right now. Maybe that'll change. But also there's a lot of internal pressure from the Palestinians not to leave. So the plans need to address what do you do to ensure that Palestinians are able to live, you know, in a situation where they have their basic needs met, including schools and the like, and at the same time, you're rebuilding the country with a vision that Palestinians need to have, that this isn't just, you know, rebuilding so they can live in tents or rebuilding so that they, you know, have to move every 6 months. So there needs to be, from the outset, and this is where I disagree with Micheline, there needs, what? No, with you, because, no, because I do think that there needs to be a political vision in addition to the economic benefits that is set from the outset, that you can't wait until, you know, we go through these 3 stages and then start talking about a political solution. So it needs to be part of the package. And again, I think that will come out of the Arab Summit next week, that they will reinforce a position that they've had on this point for many years.
Okay, I will definitely come back to Labid's point of view, plan. But, you know, before we reconstruct Gaza, Gary, are we sure that the war is over? We are witnessing the final maybe hours of the extended first phase. And it seems like the second phase is nobody's sure if it will start or not. Is there any real possibility we go back to war?
There's a possibility of that happening, Ahmed. But as I said earlier, neither side really wants to resume the war. From the perspective of Hamas, they have taken a horrific beating, and they need the time to rebuild. They need a long time, as much as they can get, which is why they'd love to see a phase two. I think the prospects for that are very limited. Israel, on the other hand, is, let's face it, Israel has a very high-powered economy. This war has been a major drain on the Israeli budget, on Israeli economic projects, and on the Israeli private sector. This is the machine that drives that very successful economy. If you're sending 400,000 reservists into battle, you're pulling them off the line where their work is necessary. That's a decline in production and efficiency and productivity, and that's what Israel is suffering from right now. So neither side really wants to see the war resume. And so we still technically are in phase one. It hasn't been extended. My expectation is, since there's no phase two, they'll just extend phase one under the condition that Israel doesn't resume the war to the extent that they had before, and Hamas releases additional hostages. But that's going to take some negotiation, and I don't know where they are on that. So, but the war could resume. My own personal belief is, and this will come as a shock, but I think Bibi Netanyahu wants to go back to what existed pre-October 7th. That is, we now have a much diminished Hamas, far less capable of threatening Israel and Israelis, but still a dangerous organization, a terrorist organization, a terrorist group today, given the damage it has suffered. That's the optimum decision, way forward for Bibi Netanyahu, because it means that there's no reconciliation between the West Bank and Gaza, and there's no possibility of that ever happening. And Israel, as it's shown before, can manage it, particularly now with a somewhat reduced threat from Hamas. The Arab plan that we're likely to see emerge from Cairo next week is probably going to call for a independent Palestinian administration to govern Gaza. It sounds wonderful. And with that, I think you'd see Gulf countries step up, sign all the checks that Donald Trump wants them to do, because he loves big projects using OPM, other people's money, and things can proceed. But that is detached from reality, because even an independent Palestinian, so-called independent Palestinian administration, in the view of the Israeli right, will be beholden to the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And that means one thing: they want two states. And that's something that the Israeli right cannot live with. And so from the perspective of Bibi Netanyahu and his right wing, we go back to the status quo ante. In Israel, they call it mowing the lawn, except now the grass is a lot shorter.
Larry, I'll go back to you. You'll come next, Micheline. So I'll go back to you, Larry. As usual, 2 questions at one time. You still have 3 minutes to answer. The first one is, it seems that West Bank is somehow unnoticed. Like, we definitely need to focus on Gaza. I understand why, but in the West Bank, there are a military operation, Israeli military operation going on. There is violence. But we also have the Palestinian Authority, which, to my knowledge, paralyzed, corrupt. So what about the West Bank? This is one question. Second question is, what's your take on the the Knesset's law to suspend, I guess this is the term they use, the UNRWA operations in Gaza and the West Bank? What's your take on that? What does that mean for Palestinian refugees?
So let me start with the second one on UNRWA. For those who don't know, UNRWA has been around since 1949, basically was set up to deal with the Palestinian refugees from the Israeli War of Independence, as it's called, and was set up to address the needs of this population. The population has grown. The Israelis argue that the refugees in the Palestinian context are treated different than refugees in all other contexts. But what's important for this point, so that may be something that needs to be addressed, but what's true right now is that UNRWA is responsible for 40–50% of the services that are provided to Palestinians in Gaza today, and maybe 10–15% in the West Bank. UNRWA also has refugees that it services in Lebanon, in Syria, and in Jordan, obviously. And so it's a big operation. It has faced deserved criticism for some of its practices of not vetting sufficiently all its employees, of not, at least according to the accusations, of allowing some of its properties to be used by Hamas terrorists, whether knowingly or unknowingly, whether under pressure, not under pressure, but certainly not a good look. The U.S. has cut off assistance to UNRWA, and as I noted a year ago, I don't think that assistance is coming back, and certainly it's not coming back in the next 4 years. Other countries also cut off assistance to UNRWA after Israel presented allegations regarding some of the UNRWA workers who were aligned with Hamas. They've resumed their. And now into this mix, Israel has come up with this law which says we're not going to deal with UNRWA at all. And again, you can't work in Gaza without having some interactions with the Israeli authorities just to get goods in and the like. So I don't know exactly what's happening today on the ground, but this will come to a head soon. And with dire consequences for some of just the caring for the basic needs of Palestinians. West Bank, we forget about the West Bank because of what's going on in Gaza and concerns about that. The West Bank for the first year was basically, on the one hand, quiet on the Palestinian side in terms of protests and the like, and on the Israeli side was also relatively quiet, except for Israeli settlers who were trying to provoke responses from the Palestinians and provoke, in a sense, a conflagration. I was in Ramallah last April for a couple of days, and again, my friends there told me how hard it was to move in and out of Ramallah to other cities where they have family, friends, and so it's created these islands within the West Bank. And then within the last 2–3 months, Israel has gone on the offensive in specific locations in the West Bank, refugee camps in the West Bank, to root out terrorist gangs there. Initially, it was done in cooperation with the Palestinian Authority Security Forces, which is a U.S.-trained and funded security force. It's been trained, under U.S. Support for 20 years. Apparently, they too are facing trouble with getting resources from this administration. But again, that aside, the situation is increasingly volatile and could blow up. And, you know, as I think Gary said, the prospect of an Israeli government formally annexing the West Bank is just the light that could, you know, kindle the conflagration.
Okay,
Can I respond?
Yeah, sure. But let me ask this question first, and then you do
But I
whatever
would
you
like
want.
to- is it-
Sure.
is it- I want to
You can
respond
do
to that.
both. So my question to you is the Middle East kind of cursed? Is it doomed? Do we have, you know, sometimes the ironic part of that is sometimes I think, you know, when the Middle East is in war, we are on demand, right? So we are under the spot. So maybe Chancellor Jeremy keeps us because of the war. If there is sustainable peace, I'm not sure if I will lose my job, but is there a hope for sustainable peace, Micheline?
I need to respond first to,
Sure.
to my colleagues who a bit distorted my answer. So the reality on the ground is the following. In the West Bank and in Gaza, the recent polls, which are only polls, I would grant you, suggest that actually very few people are in support of a two-state solution. In Israel, that is also the same. And it's again poll, and polls change, and I agree with that. But since 2012, where there was a strong support for a two-state solution, there is much less support now. Fewer Israelis are in support of a two-state solution, not because they don't think it's a good idea, at least the people on the left, but because they don't think it's viable. They didn't think it was viable in 2000 because they didn't think that there was a partners, but now there is no partner. They think it's even less viable, okay? So that's the reality. Let's start with the reality because, gentlemen, you want to talk about reality. Let's start with that. Now, next question. Having said that, in that very grim reality, there is a humanitarian crisis in which over 2 million Palestinians are suffering dearly, and something needs to happen. And the Israelis tell us, at least the Israeli government, they're ready to resume war if and only if unless Hamas is gone. So what is happening in the meantime? What do we do in the meantime? Everybody who has known my work knows that 20 years ago, I was writing, when nobody was writing, about the Confederacy solution. So I don't need to be told two-state solution is better. I know all that. But currently, when you don't even have a Palestinian governance, and you have such a high level of humanitarian crisis, the question is what is happening in the interim. Not that the political solution should be pushed on the sideline. That's not what we're talking about. It's what happened now. Mr. Trump's proposed an idea that is ludicrous. We all agree. But he has provoked people to think about it. I did not hear once a good position coming from anywhere, Arab states, Cairo, maybe next week, the Saudi, maybe soon. The first time I hear something that is proposed on the Israeli side, it's okay, it's moving forward. I have not heard anything. Maybe you did. And if you did, just tell me, because I want to learn about that. Can't hear about the two-state solution because it's not happening since 2000, since Camp David II. So let's talk about what's happening in the interim. We need a Palestinian governance. Palestinians should govern themselves. They need capacity to do that. And who is going to provide the capacity? This is the big question. Is it going to be the Gulf countries? Is it be the Jordanian? Is it going to be the Egyptian? Is it going to be a combination of both? Who is it going to be the Egyptian, Mr. So this is sort of the type of questions that are very important to address, not to say that while we address them, we push this on the sideline, the proper sovereignty that Palestinians deserve.
Micheline, I know we have always this debate. If, I guess, the main sensitivity from Egypt, and I'm not representing Egypt, but I'm just saying, is the very same experience you were referring to, governing Gaza from 1948, technically till 1967, was very sensitive to both sides, Egyptians and Palestinians. The Egyptians, I can guarantee you, would never do it again, especially that if Egypt is to put hand on Gaza whatever the diplomatic name is, administrative governance, whatever, they will be required by the United States, by Israel, to disarm Hamas and Jihad, and the Egyptians will never do it because it's like you're catching fire. And this is a real problem.
Well, I don't say it's not a problem because the demilitarization is the first step for sure. But it's on the table, and I'm sure that there are ways of improving this, and I'm sure that there are other ways to think about that. But I would like to hear from my colleague who have talked about the two-state solution, which actually failed in 2000. And really the reason why it failed, not because it was a bad idea, because for 7 years, since 1993, since the Oslo Agreement, for 7 years, Palestinians did not have the proper social, economic, and security arrangement. And so it failed. And so interim processes, interim agreement, interim efforts are to be taken equally in consideration. Otherwise, peace agreement don't last. That's all
Okay, before we move to our third, and you didn't answer my question yet about the Middle East. But like, before we go to the third round, we have like 15 minutes till the Q&A. So if you already have a question in mind, a comment in mind, kindly just use, I guess there is a notebook or, and pens or pencils. Kindly write your name and your question, and in 15 minutes or less, we will start collecting questions. And where is Adam, by the way? Okay, perfect. So, I'll do the last round this way because I insist Micheline should answer my question first. No. Is the Middle East doomed? Is it cursed? Do we have a real, practical horizon for peace, coexistence?
So I am an idealist, but a pragmatist too. All right, both. It happens that you have to bring the two together. Let's remember the positive things that happen in the Middle East, not just the negative one. We have Israel who had signed peace agreement with a number of countries, Arab countries, Egypt being one of them in 1978, Jordan in 1994, and then with the Abraham Accord, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan. That's a good thing. The problem of the Abraham Accord, we all know, was it overlooked the Palestinian. So it was a good agreement, but it missed a big area. And that was not forgiven, as we know, because it certainly was one of the key triggers of October 7. But that doesn't mean that in and of itself, the Abraham Accord could not include and shouldn't include the Palestinian participation. So being pragmatic, this is already on the table. It exists. It creates cooperations between countries. Not a bad thing to expand it, being more comprehensive and more inclusive, which wasn't. Then I just talk in my preliminary remark about the regional economic and infrastructure initiatives, the Middle East Corridor, IMEC, that aims to connect India, Europe via the Middle East, with the understanding it was meant by Biden and others to outcompete the China Belt and Road Initiative. But still, it could be expanded. It could be expanded and created in order to create a lifeline for countries, not just like in Gaza and the Palestinian territories, Palestine, or Lebanon, or Syria. It could become a lifeline to create economic capacity for those countries not to just be failed state, but to survive in a region that requires some level of stability. So that's perhaps my utopic, but I would start in the realm of possibility, what's already there, and expand from there.
I will conclude by Larry, so Gary first.
You want me to answer the
as you like, yeah.
the gloom and doom question?
Yeah, please.
Oh, under the current
the governance of West Bank and
under
Gaza,
the current lineup of
choose.
leaders in the Middle East, yes, it's a lost cause. And I was a diplomat for a long, long time, and you can't be a diplomat with being an optimist, but taking stock of the current leaderships throughout the Middle East right now, it's hard to be optimistic. It really is. Positions are pretty firmly dug in, and a concept of compromise is just not under consideration right now. I will also say, and some of my students that are here present in the audience this will sound familiar, and that is, in order to have meaningful diplomacy and negotiation, the sides have to be seeking objectives that are not mutually exclusive. But in many cases in the Middle East, certainly when it comes to Palestinians and the Israelis, the Iranians and the Israelis and Hezbollah, and you can throw the United States in there, there's no overlap in the objectives. So diplomatic negotiations are almost fruitless if they're not willing to compromise, which they're not. Now, a new generation who takes stock of what their parents and grandparents and the forefathers before that done and did not do, and say, to hell with that, we're starting over, and we're going to listen, and then we're going to sit down and fix some of these problems. But in my lifetime, probably not. And I really hate to be pessimistic, because for the longest time, I was an optimist. And to Micheline's point about a two-state solution, no. If it's possible at all, we're probably talking at least one generation now, and likely two. That's how dim prospects are for the suffering Palestinians, and many Israelis as well, which means Israelis are going to have to be poised for more combat, potentially more wars. We didn't get to the subject of Iran, but I hope maybe someone in the audience, because I would enjoy, I don't know about enjoy is the right word to use, but I think it's
no, you're right. I was taken by Gaza, but yeah, you're right.
It's important because that would be more than just a simple conflict.
Larry.
So first let me say I agree with Micheline about the polls in Israel and Palestine at present. Majorities don't favor a two-state solution. And certainly I agree with Gary that the leaders in both countries are far from the leaders that will be necessary to move any type of serious peace process forward. I too have long been an optimist, even faced with these difficult situations. And so I hope something will happen. I can't predict exactly what would be the switch that'll turn, but I hope something will happen that will create some momentum for this type of progress. You know, the Biden administration for 4 years held out the prospect of a deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel as the mechanism for creating a momentum towards addressing the Palestinian issue. It didn't work. We can get into why and what mistakes were made and the like. You know, to me, the major mistake that happened was that the IDF fell asleep on October 7th. If the IDF had responded as the Palestinians expected them to, we'd have it very different. We'd be talking about a very different situation. We probably would have had a Saudi-Israeli normalization, and we'd be talking a lot less gloom and some potential. Whether it would have been met or not, I don't know. I went to take up my post at the head of West Bank Gaza USAID mission in 1999, which I describe as the height of the Oslo period. The economy was doing well in Palestine and in Israel. There was relatively no terrorist incidents during the first year I was there. And we were optimistic that negotiations would lead to a settlement, whatever the terms would be on issues like refugees in Jerusalem and statehood. Those were to be negotiated, but we were confident that we could work out a deal. And again, President Clinton did all he could to try and bring that about at Camp David. And then something happened. Whether you blame it on Ariel Sharon's walk on the Temple Mount, which people now have forgotten about, or you blame it on Arafat's decision to allow the Palestinians to use arms and basically initiate a second intifada. But I went from being very optimistic to having a very difficult 3.5 years of my tenure as the USAID mission director, working under those circumstances where we weren't anymore thinking about solving the problem, reaching a settlement. We were literally just trying to keep things going so that some point, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, there would be something to build on. And I agree with Gary, that's how I think we are right now. But the little optimism I have is that something could happen. No one a year ago had on their bingo card that Bashar al-Assad would be leaving Syria. No one had that Hezbollah would be destroyed effectively as a military option. So I don't know what it will be. I do know things that I'm worried about. Iran is clearly, a real danger point. I think the annexation of the West Bank would be a real danger point. And I fear that if we don't go from where we are now in terms of the ceasefire to an agreed upon next step, whatever it be, whether it's extending phase 1 or it's some new negotiation about phase 2, the pressures in Israel particularly will be to resume the war. And I worry about that.
Okay, so hopefully we have some questions now. I'll hand it over to Professor Adam Rovner. And we can do hybrid, like some questions written and some. So till Adam reads some of the cards here, do we have anyone who want to ask a question? And as always, kindly just, be respectful and don't take more than a minute and kindly introduce yourself.
Ahmed, you want me to start reading?
Okay. Yeah.
Is there a possibility of Gaza and the West Bank being united under one Palestinian government spearheaded by the Palestinian Authority?
No. There's no really need to elaborate. That possibility is pretty nil for the reasons I explained earlier. The current Israeli government is not going to allow that to happen, and therefore it won't. The Arabs that will be convening next week in Cairo are hopeful of that, and that's where even their, I think, well-intentioned proposal is a bit untethered from the reality, because this government is adamant that there will be no connection between the two for the time being, as long as this government can prevent it.
I'd say no today, but would note that, as I think was pointed out, there are elections in Israel in 12 or 14 months by law. Maybe that would change the Israeli position. And I think what I expect out of Cairo next week is not an insistence that the Palestinian Authority take control of Gaza tomorrow, but that be the goal, and there be some type of interim administration that the Palestinians will frame as being under the PLO or PA umbrella, and the Israelis will say is an independent Palestinian actor, and they'll agree, to disagree about how it should be characterized.
No, but perhaps in the future. All of us said the same thing. So yes, no, in the past, there was an attempt to bridge the two, and the Israelis did not get involved, and both Hamas and Fatah was not able to unify. Certainly not under current conditions. This is not going to happen, and certainly Hamas has been perceived as an entity that should not be a partner in any form of negotiations from the Israeli perspective. So on that one, you're correct, so no. And would the PLO can reconstitute itself? That's the hope.
I will say there is one unpredictable factor in all of this.
Just one?
His name is Donald Trump. I could foresee, I'm not predicting this will happen, but I could foresee the Arabs presenting a plan that looks reasonable on paper, and Trump is drawn to it and will want to embrace it as his own. And there is one person, in fact, I'll just say, having met Bibi Netanyahu 30 times and been in long meetings with him, I have never seen him as obsequious as I saw him in the press conference with Donald Trump several weeks ago after their meeting. I've never seen that from him. It was like he had undergone a personality transformation or transplant. Bibi is afraid of Donald Trump because he's unpredictable. Yes, right now, Trump is very strongly supportive, but not for any particular ideology. Trump has no ideology. And I think Netanyahu, being the astute politician that he is, can read Donald Trump. And he doesn't want to trigger that unpredictable factor in Donald Trump. And Trump says, you know, the Arabs got a pretty good idea. You need to figure it out and how to make it happen. Because Donald Trump is the one person who can do major damage to Bibi Netanyahu in Israel. Because in Israel, there is no better friend than Donald Trump. And if he starts pointing nasty fingers at Bibi Netanyahu, against whom he still has a grudge, let's not forget, after the 2020 election and Netanyahu's embrace of the Biden victory, he may just decide, you've got to take this and swallow this bitter pill. That's the unpredictable factor. I don't think it will necessarily happen, but as I said, the man is unpredictable. He could do something that we can't conceive of right now.
Adam, if you take my recommendation, maybe we can just make it in waves, like 3-4 questions at one time.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
just to make sure all the questions are.
You got it. This one is specifically for Gary, but I suppose everyone can weigh in. I'm just going to read it the way it's written. I found your characterization of Lebanon to be deeply troubling. Are the Lebanese people happy with the consistent bombing of civilians and civilian infrastructure since Israel's invasion? Do another couple. Can you speak to the advantage of the India, Middle East, Europe corridor over the Suez Canal? And this one is, as a Palestinian, there is always discussion about moving forward, but there never seems to be a plan to end the occupation. Can you please touch on how we can have a sovereign nation if every aspect of the occupation is not discussed and ended?
So we have 3 questions. You pick whatever question you want to.
Regarding Lebanon, no, of course not. No rational person, whether the Lebanese or not, is going to accept what has happened to the Lebanese people, either at the hands of Hezbollah or during the Israeli bombing of various targets in Lebanon during the direct confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah. So absolutely not. They are happy, however, with the current political situation, that it's so much improved and that there are genuine prospects for improvement in their lives. Most of the Lebanese, including within and among the Shia population, don't like what Hezbollah has done. They don't like the fact that Hezbollah dragged them into this conflict that no one in Lebanon wanted, except maybe perhaps Hezbollah. And then therefore they're pleased with the outcome despite the awful sacrifice in terms of Lebanese lives. And we're talking about on the order of 2,000 or so, I believe, without knowing the actual figures for Hezbollah losses. Prospects are much improved for Lebanon right now, but it's precarious for the reasons I outlined before. The challenges are monumental, and the outcome is not assured at all. And Lebanon, more than ever, now needs the support of the West, especially the United States, which has been the primary backer of the Lebanese National Army. And if that stops, either the funding or the training, then those prospects become dimmer by the day.
And we didn't hear from Micheline and Larry feel free to.
So I'll take the Palestinian.
Yeah, please. And if I may ask you, all of you, kindly just to limit the answer to 1-2 minutes, just to make sure we have as many questions as possible.
Sure. So, when I was in my job in the early 2000s, we would have these meetings. And again, this is a time when the Intifada was underway, and the Israelis were undertaking constant incursions into the West Bank. Settlements were growing. And we would have these meetings amongst the donors, I'm sure Gary had it even later, where they'd come in with maps, and they say, if they go one step further, the two-state solution is dead. We're 20 years later, they've gone 20 steps further, and we're still thinking that, somehow we can work it out. And I don't have a formula to tell you exactly how it would work out. I do think annexation would be a step too far to then roll back, but who knows? But there needs to be a formula that works for Palestinians so they don't feel they're living under occupation, and for Israelis that they don't feel that they're subject to security concerns. And in some ways, I support what Micheline said earlier, that we do need to think about creative ways in which the Palestinian entity and the Israeli state are going to live together. And as I've said, quoting a Palestinian friend, the Palestinians need maybe 24 hours of an independent state, and then they can negotiate as an independent state with Israel what the terms of a Benelux would look like, or some other model that you can come up with. But until they have that sense of dignity, it's going to be much more difficult.
Micheline, and I would highly ask you kindly to limit it to 1-2 minutes, because I can see Adam has so many.
No problem. I have the slide behind me, so that's going to be helpful. I have written before the Abraham Accord in 2019 a book called The Levant Express, in which I had a railroad that I put together that was going to go through the Suez Canal. So the question was, why is it not going through the Suez Canal? And so that was the original proposal I had, and I'd communicated that idea both to the current Crown Prince, then to the Mubadala leader, then to Hassan bin Talal, then to various members of the Knesset. This idea, to my surprise, has been picked up after the Abraham Accord. They have circumvented, surprisingly, the Suez Canal. I thought Egypt should be part of it. Egypt is not very happy that it's not part of the IMEC corridor. I would have loved to see it part of and I still think that it should be. So please, just watch it. This could be expanded.
We will reroute it.
We can reroute.
Yeah.
All right.
Just, as I said, I've looked at many of these plans, and many of the plans have the IMEC as a basis and a trunk road through Gaza, to a port in Gaza. So, this is part of that.
Okay, I have to...
Can I just say one more thing about the gas?
20 seconds.
Having been invited in the Knesset to discuss the railroad before, in 2017, 18, I did ask for a road to Jenin and Ramallah. I was not heard, but so you know, I did.
Thank you. Adam, three more questions, please.
Sure. This one, the panelists have discussed every aspect of the situation except Israel's territorial aspirations in the West Bank, as demonstrated by the support of the Jewish settlers in the Israeli government, the Israeli population and the American population. This questioner would like to know what is to be done to rein in the settlers, and who will do it. Number two, whose responsibility will it be to fund the rebuilding of Gaza? Will anyone want to do it?
Trump, I would say.
And then here's, this is similar to another one. The UN has estimated it will take up to 350 years to rebuild Gaza. Possibly that's if the UN is put in charge of it. If Israel continues to blockade, do you think this is likely, this 350 years of rebuilding?
But just to correct that, I guess they said 30 years, not 300.
Okay, I'm just
not
reading the
correcting
question.
you. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'm just correcting the question.
I think
Should I start? I have one.
yeah, I think all of us have mentioned a real possibility that Israel may attempt to annex the very minimum parts of the West Bank and perhaps even all of it, which would dramatically transform the whole issue of the conflict. How are you going to rein it in? Well, this is an initiative of Mr. Netanyahu and the right wing in his government. They have never tried to cover this up. I mean, if you read statements that they made even before they were voted into office, this is what they wanted. And so we can't be surprised by this. And if there's anything that's going to stop it, it's the United States. Certainly with the backing of the international community, which they'd be happy to do, that says you're not doing it. And most certainly if he wants, Netanyahu wants this normalization agreement with Saudi Arabia, annexation is not going to do it. As a matter of fact, if you recall, when they did the Abraham Accords back in the first Trump administration, the United Arab Emirates made non-annexation a precondition. And Netanyahu agreed to it. And so he would be going back on his promise if he did move forward on annexation. And therefore, we can't even state with any confidence that the Abraham Accords with the extant countries, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and sadly Sudan, I say sadly because of its current state, would all withdraw themselves from the Abraham Accords, which I don't think Donald Trump wants. That was his signature achievement in the Middle East. So Trump does have some tools available to him to rein in the Israelis if he chooses to do so.
So first, I've also seen the 350-year figure. It's based on sort of, calculations and, what seems to be normal assumptions. But I don't know if folks are familiar with the political philosopher Albert Hirschman, who came up with this idea of a hiding hand. And I believe in these types of situations, the hiding hand will prove the solution, so it doesn't take 350 years. It'll take much less. But there needs to be the will. On the occupation and reining in. So it's gotten really bad, even like I said, when I was there April last year. To my regret, I thought the Biden administration acted too slowly in responding to pressuring the Israelis to take the steps to curb the settler violence that has been growing. Finally, they did take a number of steps, including sanctioning several West Bank actors, provocateurs, people who our government's intelligence agencies believed were directly involved. And those sanctions, were felt. I mean, they affected bank accounts that people had, abilities to do even transfers in Israel, because some of the Israeli banks were nervous that they would get caught up in this. So it was having some impact and potentially could grow. Guess what? First day in office, Trump eliminates the sanctions on these folks, and now has revoked other provisions that were modest efforts by the Biden administration to hold Israel government accountable for actions by the various settlers. And as noted, the Israeli government itself is in a tough position because several of its ministers not only are resident in the territories, but are active supporters of these efforts and come to their defense, provide, will show up at the trials and the like. So it's It's something that needs to be done. I agree with Gary. If Trump said, I want this to stop, Netanyahu would have to figure out a way to resolve it. And if there's a deal on the table, perhaps that would be the stimulus for Trump to pressure Netanyahu. And the history of what happened in 2019, 2020 is clear. The one point I will correct, and again, maybe I've got this wrong, but I believe that the deal Trump-Kushner cut with the Emiratis was 5 years. And that after 5 years, we will see. So, go. No, I'm finished.
So I can see that Trump is entrusted with the messianic role to stop the settler, which is impossible to imagine, but this is what I hear from my dear colleagues. There is actually something that Israeli could do, and I'm not sure they will do it, but it would be interesting if they were. There is a law that is on the table right now in Israel, which is about it's a law to pass mandatory conscriptions for the ultra-Orthodox. Yeah. And they are really, really afraid that that law will pass. Now, you have to know the ultra-Orthodox tends to be in the settlements, and they have been radicalized. Many of them are religious zealots. Not all of them, but many of them. So just imagine a conscription. That's a sobering effect to go to the army, I can tell you. And probably then you stop waiting for the Messiah when you start having to just you get in the army, you stop looking for the Messiah. You're a bit more pragmatic. You realize that, that the person you can kill you as well, and it's a never-ending nightmare. So I don't know if that's the solution. It's not a solution in and of itself. But if it's not going to come from Trump, one would hope that that law, that force and compel those ultra-Orthodox to go to the army, pass.
Okay. Okay.
So, Gary, if war were to break out against Iran, who would be the most likely combatants, and what would be the most likely outcome?
And let's take one more.
Thank you. I feel like a lot of this conversation is centered around like the future of the Middle East and how it's destined to fail, I think was a couple of things that were said. And it's like an American, as somebody who pays taxpayer dollars to fund the U.S. military, you see that hundreds of thousands of people have died in Iraq as the result of the U.S. military. You see U.S. weapons being used by Saudi Arabia and Israel to kill civilians at large numbers as well. And it feels very wrong for me to sit here and hear how there's no culpability associated with American involvement in the Middle East, associated with like these predictions that you're saying about how they're destined to fail. So I was just wondering what your opinions on those points are.
We can take one last question.
Thank you to all of you. You said to introduce yourselves quickly. I've lived in the Middle East for the last 12 years, in Jordan, Dubai, and Saudi. And I'm curious about what the role is of the GCC, most specifically Saudi and the UAE. Their two biggest fears seem to be Iran and political Islam coming into their countries. And from speaking with friends both from both those countries, they seem less involved or less interested in like the plight of Palestinians and that the issue that we've been discussing. So do you see them taking a more leadership role, or do they kind of just follow, behind the U.S.? Like, what's the role that they can play moving forward?
GCC?
Yeah. Just I have two papers here. One says 1 minute left. The other one is time is over. So I'm gonna use a manual plan to 2 minutes maximum, please.
Yeah, clock's better.
Okay, I will do it. So yeah.
To the gentleman about the U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, is that was your question? Yes, I would just want to make sure I was trying to write notice. Okay. The United States has a very long history of backing dictators in the Middle East. We know that. Often interested for geopolitical, economic reasons. The war of Iraq was one example that is striking. And it's been highly problematic. So with the withdrawal, I mean, the fact that now the United States no longer need oil, it's focusing more on other form of interest, perhaps geopolitical interest. And so you're correct to say that it has a bigger role today than it used to have in the past, in the sense that it should become a better broker for peace resolution than it has been so far. This has not been the case so far. The question is, who else will do it? Will be the Iranian, the Chinese, the Russian? There is a void. Who is the third party?
I'll leave the Iranian question for you. So let me, I mean, I agree with Micheline. The U.S. has a long history, mixed, some allies, but certainly supporting, dictators and others in the region, and that's not going to change. But in terms of arms issues, I mean, I think from the Saudi perspective, at least the government perspective, they want, U.S. involvement. They're looking, I mean, their goal is to have some type of alliance with the United States. So it's not going to come from the Saudis in terms of an objection. And the United States, we too. We had an election where a president who, was not popular on the Arab street was defeated by someone who, has much, more radical ideas about, how to deal with Arab states. Again, you just can see in the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, where are we? How Trump has reversed some of the modest actions that Biden took on arms transfer issues, which were reversed yesterday, about reversing the executive order that Biden had issued that we have to take into account and review arms sales with certain human rights considerations. So if anything, we're going in the opposite direction. Arms sales are going to become one of our leading exports to the Middle East. And unless there's a surge in, our population to oppose it, I don't see, where it's going to stop. The Israelis clearly want arms. The Saudis want arms. The Emiratis want arms. And just one last thing on the Emiratis and the Saudis. I think there is a before October 7th and an after October 7th. I mean, the Saudis certainly have shifted their rhetorical position. We'll see if it holds up substantively, but changed dramatically post October 7th in terms of speaking about Palestinian rights, the humanitarian problems, the two states, and similarly the Emiratis, who have continued through the last several years to have this robust relationship with Israel, also I think a bit worried about getting too far out ahead of their own street. But so far, much less, it hasn't affected their policies towards Israel.
On the question of Iran, the most likely scenario, but it could play out a number of ways, is the Israelis receive intelligence that the Iranians are moving forward on weaponizing a nuclear weapon, and they will act immediately. They will not wait around. Depending on the outcome of the initial wave, the United States could be drawn into that conflict. The other scenario is the Israelis perceive as I said earlier, I think, that the window for the most effective strike on the Iranian nuclear infrastructure is closing for whatever reason. Maybe the Iranians are bolstering up their defenses. I don't think they can, because they're not going to get anything from the Russians, who are otherwise occupied at the moment, at least for the moment. And so the Israelis could decide it's either strike while the iron's hot, or they move into another situation, which I don't think they want, which is now the Israelis present the previously formidable defenses that they thought they had. So I think the likelihood of the United States being drawn into that kind of conflict is probably 50-50, which is very discouraging, because a war with Iran is not what the United States needs right now. That's not a war from which we can easily extricate ourselves, as we experienced firsthand in our misguided war in Iraq. Mr. Trump, in that press conference with Netanyahu, said some encouraging things. He did not actually utter the words negotiations with the Iranians, but he threw out some bits that suggest he's willing to consider that, and in fact, he may be doing it, I don't know. On the other hand, from the Iranian perspective, the Iranian president, who really doesn't have a whole lot of power, has been very positive and public about his willingness to engage in renewed negotiations with the United States and others. The supreme leader, within the last few weeks, has shot that idea down. He claiming that the United States cannot be trusted. We violated previous agreements, and he's right, we have. They have too. So he said no, but then afterwards I started reading commentary coming out of Iran. I said, well, you know, if you really parse this in Farsi, he left some wiggle room there. So we'll have to see how willing the Iranians are to negotiate. That's the solution we'd all like to see. I hope the Israelis want to see that. As for the concern of the Gulf countries that the gentleman in the back mentioned, very palpable. And there is a lot of consternation on the part of the Gulf countries, because they feel betrayed already. When the Iranians launched an attack on a major oil facility, the single largest oil facility on planet Earth, called Abdrabou, in the middle of the Saudi desert, the Trump administration didn't respond. This was during the first Trump administration. Did not respond. The Saudis were horrified. They thought they had this commitment from the United States. So if something happens vis-a-vis Iran and the Emirates, Iran and Saudi Arabia, will he respond? They don't know. Thus their trepidation and nervousness, because they have the ability to withstand an Iranian attack for maybe 2 days. Not much. Their defenses are thin, despite all the weapons they have purchased, frontline weapons, radar systems, fighters, intercepting. They've got everything. And so they have limited capability to repel an attack, and their fallback is America. I agree with you. We should be held more accountable. The people in the Middle East hold us accountable. I heard it every day as a diplomat over there. Why are you know, just on and on and on. It was nonstop. It's something that all of us in the U.S. Foreign Service understood, didn't talk about much, but it stems from the overwhelming popular support that Israel enjoys in this country, especially in the Congress. And with that, it's unlikely we'll see major changes. Sorry.
We can, I guess, given the time, last 3 questions, because they should be really brief.
I've got one written. Is there anyone else in the audience who wants to ask a question in the back? Okay, I'll read this one in the meantime. Yeah. How can the possibility of peace be discussed when Israel is currently expanding its policy of land theft into Syria?
There was a lot of talk about, I guess, who would rebuild Gaza. I guess, who do you guys think would be the most culpable and should be, I guess, writing the checks for rebuilding Gaza? And how do you convince them to do that?
I think I said it before. It's Donald Trump's fallback, other people's money, not the United States. And it most likely will be the Gulf countries with conditions, i.e. there's no more fighting, there's no risk of any of the humanitarian or reconstruction efforts running into problems with Hamas, which is a big condition. So, and you may have other countries willing to step in and help as well. Turkey, I think might be willing, some of the European countries. But the conditions really, at the moment, don't exist for that kind of thing to happen.
I thought when you first asked the question, who should rebuild Gaza, the simple answer is Palestinians. And that, you know, they've built up a lot of other countries in the Gulf, you know, as the workers and laborers and architects and engineers. So, you know, at least in that sense, not forcing them out, but keeping them there keeps alive the prospects of a serious rebuilding. In terms of funding, it's going to be, you know, a whole effort to raise the money. There are going to be all kinds of goals set, which will never be reached, and then, you know, a lower goal. And at some point, if this works, there'll be some opportunities for, you know, the type of private sector investments, you know, that'll blend some of the financing with public financing and not require $53 billion from, you know, the Gulf countries and Europe and others. So, but it has to get started, you know, and so they need, you know, to start, you know, $10 billion or $20 billion committed in some ways.
Yes, just so back to the questions about the land theft. I think that one can make a very easy case about land theft in the West Bank. But when it comes to Syria, just watch the map. The Turks have actually really a much bigger stay in Syria. The Israelis have expanded with security or military outposts because they are not trusting the current government, which is extremely fragile. So there is no ambition to take over Syria, which, by the way, is as big as Jordan and Palestine and Israel together. So it's a very big land. So I don't think that that's at all in that, that ambition is not there. The West Bank, yes, I think that the case is clear to make that there was land theft there.
Just to add one point on the Syria issue and reinforce what Micheline says. I mean, I do think there's going to be a point where the US and Turkey will have to reach an agreement because, as Micheline said, Turkey is occupying and parts of Syria, but it also wants to ensure that the Kurdish group that controls the biggest, you know, land swath in Syria doesn't retain its current capabilities. And the US has supported them for the past decade. And that, you know, I don't know where Trump will go on this one. I have my fears that he'll sell out the Kurds, but it's one of those issues that will happen pretty soon. We have 1,000 troops in northeast Syria right now. Trump would like to remove them, but it's not clear if he does, you know, what happens. Do the Syrian Kurdish forces and Turks basically go to war, or you know, what happens? So.
Okay, so before I conclude the event, I would love just to share with you my experience over the last 3-4 months, or even more, maybe 6 months, since the beginning of this academic year. I love interacting with the students, and I guess there are 3 misperceptions about the center. So let me kindly just clarify them. The first misperception is there is a hidden agenda. there is some sort of an orchestration for us to do this or not to do that. And I can assure you this is not true. We don't really have any hidden agenda. And we just do as many events as we can, given the resources we have. We get the support from Korbel, from DU, and it's a pleasure really to interact with not just DU community, but also beyond DU community, Denver and Colorado. Second misperception from my interaction with my students, there is this kind of rumor that there are some words that we're not allowed to mention. It's not true. Every single word we can really mention as long as they are respectful. Third misperception is we are somehow impacted by whoever is sponsoring us. Okay, for today's event, Adam is sponsoring us, and I spoke with you for a minute before this event, and he never asked me to do anything or to ask anything or not to ask any question. Last misperception is when we invite a guest, it's not an endorsement for his or her or their positions. It's an invitation for us to interact. And I guess we will not, and myself first, we will not be able to deeply understand a very delicate, complicated question like the Middle East, the Arab-Israeli conflict, without really listening to different point of views. It's your full right to think that, you know, he said this, she said that, I don't agree, this is not true. It's your full right to say it. I guess it's all about how to say it, how to express it in a respectful way. Yeah, with that said, thank you, Micheline. Thanks, Larry and Gary. Yeah, thank you. Chancellor Jeremy, Dean Fritz Mayer, and all of our guests, thank you very much. And before you leave, we just remind you that on April 9, we have our coming event. This is the second part of the media in the time of war. And this time we are hosting the editor manager of Al Jazeera Network, Muhammad Muawad. He's based in Doha. He's visiting us on April 9. So yeah, just make sure you register for this event, and thank you very much.